is on the subject of mindfulness for cricketers. So across this next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to be giving a mixture of a personal perspective on mindfulness as a general concept, but also within our sport of cricket, as well as then building on that to give you some ideas about how to practice it and, of course, why to practice it. And one of the key elements I would say here is that mindfulness is a process rather than an outcome. It's something which those of us who do practice it, we do exactly that, we practice it. And it's something which can be very easily, I think, once we get past the initial hurdles, embedded to all areas of life and can make a real big difference to a sport that has so much mental focus as cricket. But as I'm mentioning things, I'm sure people will be able to acknowledge that there's other areas of their life where this will be applicable. If anyone has any questions or comments at any stage, just pop them in the chat tab. I'll keep my eye on that. And there will be a couple of times where I pause and give people a chance to reflect and throw anything out there that we have. So mindfulness is something which is discussed a lot more in sport. It is something in society that people speak about. And I really wanted to get this in as part of this trio of webinars as something that is very much positive in terms of mental health, something which is a proactive thing which people can do to not only look after their mental health to avoid difficulties, but to thrive in actual fact. And with that in mind, when we think about mindfulness, it can be for people an entirely new direction, something that they've never attempted before, never considered doing. And that can be off-putting if people think it's such a big step. But for me, it's the little steps which form this journey, for want of a better term, which make it so rewarding. But I'll give you two examples here of the new direction that it can take. So first of all, from a reactive perspective, I would use my own experience and say that having had what was my third episode of clinical depression around about 5 years ago now, I was as determined as I could be in the midst of the illness to not have to go through this again, to not have it appear to be just an episodic thing where at a certain point this is going to come back. So as well as getting well, and in my case, taking some medication, doing some talking therapy, I wanted to do things in other areas of my life which would make that sustainable and build my everyday habits. So as well as exercise and thinking a bit about diet, I also decided, through desperation to be honest, to give meditation and mindfulness a go. And when I refer to mindfulness and meditation, for me they're interchangeable because I practice meditation as part of mindfulness, but mindfulness can be things which aren't just that particular practice. So I decided to give that a go and very quickly found that this was something that helped me to think differently, to calm some anxieties that I was having, and to really start to formulate a different outlook. And it's not always been a smooth journey to serenity. There has, of course, been things which life throw up that have got in the way. But as time has gone on and as I've tried to practice it daily, it's something that I think is the most important factor to staying well as much as I can. So from a reactive perspective of my experience, there's a proactive angle to this as well, and this might be the hook that gets people interested in doing it. If you're working with players, young or old, then this might be the thing that can get them interested in doing it. And the example here is from Justin Langer. People may know this, but I'll explain it anyway. Justin Langer, at the beginning of his Test match career, was having a difficult time of it, adapting to what is, of course, the hardest part of the sport. And after a series against New Zealand, having not done as well as he would like, he was approached by a player on the opposition, John Wright, who said, after a beer and a cigarette, he says, "Have you tried meditation?" And Langer's reaction to that was, well, what do I say to this? This was the early 90s, wasn't something that he'd considered. And Wright's perspective was that Langer was trying too hard. And he was thinking, of course I'm trying hard, it's Test match cricket, it's the pinnacle. But that sat with him, and then a few days later, there was an advert in his local paper which was offering meditation lessons. So for him, who was a guy who was looking around for ways to improve, looking around at something that might make the difference, being told about this twice in the space of a week made him think, why the heck not? And he went along to have a session on meditation to introduce it to him. And he would say that ever since 1993, when that happened, he's practiced meditation each day. So for him, that was a lot around being able to develop it as a skill that could be used for batting, developing his skills of concentration and focus. And the beauty for me of meditation and mindfulness is that it does two things which would seemingly be opposites. That of focusing and narrowing your attention and concentration, but also allowing you to switch off and let things go. Some people refer to the process as training your attention muscle. And like any muscle, yes, we need to tense it sometimes to use it, but we appreciate the importance of relaxing it as well. So there's just two people's perspectives of how it can be used. And it's certainly my view, and hopefully I'll be able to explain this and do it justice, that mindfulness can help cricket. Absolutely. If we go with the Stephen Waugh-ism that cricket is 90% mental, 10% physical, then we certainly have got a whole big part of the game where there can be gains to be made, and mindfulness is something which can be used for that. But also, for me, as someone who plays cricket poorly and just for recreation, cricket helps me with mindfulness. So I think some of the elements of the game are really useful for that. Being in the outdoors, being able to, at different points in the game, have those moments where you can just switch off and pay your attention to something else and notice the things that are around you is fantastic. Now, the dictionary definitions here, I think, might make us think this is almost written for cricket. One being the mindfulness being the quality or state of being conscious or aware of something. And the longer one of a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations. So a pause here if anyone's got some thoughts that they want to pop in the chat. How could this have use in cricket? What mindfulness is being described as there? How could we transfer this and say this would be useful for cricket? I'll give it a minute for people to type anything or just have a bit of a pause and take in those definitions of it. Okay, if anyone is typing, please do continue and finish. But a couple of things that I usually pull out of this is that awareness is the real key here. Sometimes people, players, can be very fixated and appear to be aware of what is going on, but are often misdirected with that. So what we're using mindfulness for is to bring our attention as best we can to that present moment, rather than the ball before or the ball after or the day after or whatever else. So it's about trying to get that awareness properly utilised, so that we're not getting caught up with worrying about this and worrying about that, actually just thinking, making it a simple game within that. And in fact, in the lead up to the webinar, Mark, who is present tonight, sent me a question via email regarding the sort of prioritisation that players have, and how that can be misplaced, and they might have focus on one thing at the expense of another. So I think mindfulness, if we observe that in players or in teammates and think that people do get distracted and do get maybe caught up with the things which are not the best use of their attention, then this is something, through the practice of it, independent from cricket, can then be skills that are utilised within that as well. So what it comes down to, if we're looking at the science of it, is it's a way of helping us manage our fight or flight response. So we have that inbuilt with us, that when situations arise, we can have these responses automatically, which lead us to become heightened with awareness, become very stressed, have a release of cortisol, which then can, in an appropriate way, prepare us for danger, so that we're exceptionally heightened. In evolutionary terms, we've not quite caught up with the fact that this heightened awareness isn't always appropriate and isn't always useful. So although we do want to be on it when we're playing, some of the threats that we perceive are not ones which require that level and that type of response. So what has been found in so many studies, I mean, we're really talking here hundreds upon hundreds of studies regarding the impact of mindfulness and meditation on the brain. And it's something which is shown to slow down the release of cortisol and in fact strengthen our prefrontal cortex, where we're able to perhaps, in some senses, override that instinct to be able to say, no, actually, what do I want to be focusing on? So just like any other part of our body or part of our game, we think of the brain more as being something which we can train and we can shape towards what we want to do, then that can open up the possibilities of being able to use it more productively. And we have neuroplasticity. So our brain, although it does appear in that image to be fairly fixed, is always making new connections and developing on terms of what we do. If you think about habits that you have, they become very natural after a period of around a month. And that's because that neuroplasticity then has developed so that these things become more of an instinct. So if we're looking to build good habits, mindfulness perhaps being one of them, it is possible for that to be achieved. We don't have a fixed brain where everything that we believe or everything that the way our mind operates is going to be the same forever. So some things that, again, through the evidence have shown what mindfulness can do for ourselves. So there's a definite correlation with improved focus and concentration. And we think within cricket how useful that would be. It's also something that helps you to switch off and relax. For a lot of people who practice some of the techniques I'm going to mention, it is primarily for them to have that downtime, to be able to stop their mind racing after a difficult day at work or an argument with someone, being able to actually just separate those things. Also aid you in how you react to your thoughts and feelings. Something that I could never conceive of, even though I'd heard it mentioned, was the impact that mindfulness and meditation can have on what you do with your thoughts. People listening might be similar to me in that they have tendency to be quite impulsive, react very quickly and then perhaps regret quite a lot afterwards. So to be able to actually observe the thought rather than the feeling and the thought being fused and then an action coming, very, very useful. And think about in cricket, if we're getting a bit of stick from behind the stumps and we're thinking, right, F it, I'm going to go and whack this out of the park, when it might not be appropriate. Just actually creating that space between thought and action. Very, very important. Provides clarity. It provides, often we say, a quiet mind, rather than one with lots of things forcing around and competing, just settling down so that we never have an empty mind. A myth about mindfulness or meditation is that to be doing it properly, you need to have no thoughts going through your head. Well, unfortunately, that's impossible. But what it can do is help provide some clarity so that there's less going on there. And of course, it reduces stress. There's links there to the impact of it reducing cortisol, which is a stress hormone, but also just through the act of doing it. We think about how busy our lives are. We're running from one place to the next, and just giving yourself 5, 10, 15, 20, however many minutes, just to focus on yourself, just to switch off, just to have that level of peace and calm for a period of time. And I think for cricket as well, outside of just the practice of mindfulness, it does give us a route to move on from setbacks, because we may not be making judgments quite so drastically, because we get more perspective when we practice mindfulness and meditation, simply because we are giving that gap with it. But I'm going to give you some ideas here for practice and then wrap it up. And if there's any questions, please just fire them at me. And of course, I'm coming at this as someone who's practiced it for a decent length of time now. I've spoken to a lot of people who both teach mindfulness meditation, who practice it themselves, and people who've got research backgrounds in this. So not just my view of a lot of people, but it really is something that hopefully is getting more and more accessible with things that are available. So with this practice, I would say some of the goals that we can achieve are that we manage to get our head, like Joss is there, not in the ball before or the ball after, but that ball. The probably ultimate aim mentally of playing our game is just doing what we can at each constituent part. And some other outcomes which are great for cricket and for life in general, if I come back to Langer there and his experience, it builds a curiosity. If we're used to observing our thoughts and we're used to just noticing things about us more, we become more curious, which leads to great outcomes of intrigue, to not take things at face value and be able to explore and learn a lot more. It does lead to more openness, because we become much more open with ourselves when we practice this. We understand ourselves better, so one would hope that that can be used to then be open with others, having gone through that process yourself. But a key one is the acceptance. And one of the best books, I think the best book to introduce people to mindfulness is called Wherever You Go, There You Are, which is a fantastic introduction to the practice, and is really talking about how much we need to accept. So acceptance can often be something which seems like we've backed down, or we've let things happen to us. But there are so many things around us in a game of cricket or in our lives which we can't actually change. Or if we were to go about righting every single perceived wrong in the world, we would spend all our time doing things externally rather than looking after ourselves as well. So that acceptance, something which I found personally, took me a long time to be open and honest with myself, but now I feel much more able to accept and know that difference between what I can control and what I can't control. So some ways that people can do this. You may well have heard of or indeed use an app like Headspace. I think if we're trying to advocate this to others, that's a great place to start with, particularly as their mindfulness training and the way that they describe it is something that is very proactive, very positive, and very much about skills. And they have a program within their app which was developed for players in the NBA. They've done a lot of work in person with Premier League footballers. This is something which Josh Butler, Liam Plunkett and Mark Wood, to name just a few players, all have as part of what they do to look after themselves. Another alternative, if people have used Headspace, is Smiling Mind. Similar concept, it's an Australian company, but if you're looking to sort of mix up what you've already been doing, Smiling Mind is a great one. And these guided meditations and mindfulness practices are the best way, I would say, personally, to introduce to it, because it can seem intimidating. How do I start? Press the button and they will talk you through it. But here, as we finish, are some ideas that might be available to you. You might want to give these a go at some point. Well, I certainly hope you would. And they can be done in 5 minutes. 5 minutes of your time, could be extended to more, half an hour perhaps. People will practice mindfulness in little phases during the day, or maybe have a block of it. That's something that can be worked on as well. But some of these ones, the first and most important one, just sit and notice. The power of that, from a busy day where we're conditioned to be going to the next thing, or when we are maybe sat down on the train or waiting in the traffic, is to maybe look at the phone or think ahead to what we're doing and not have any time wasted. But if it's possible to just have a few moments where you just sit and maybe notice how you're feeling, notice how your breath is. Is it short? Is it deep? Notice things that are around you. Are you agitated? Is there any physical pains? Are you hungry? Are you finding your thoughts going in a particular direction? 5 minutes of that can be really eye-opening. And that is something that is available to everyone. And some of these things are so simple that we look past them, but they can have a great benefit. And you find if you give yourself 5 minutes a day just to do that, you see the benefit of just being able to have that little time switching off, observing, and then build on that. Breathing is always a big part of meditation or mindfulness practices, because it's something which does help us relax. We hear that from a very young age, take a deep breath. And as you do that, you do have that physiological impact, but also it helps us to concentrate on something other than all the things flying around. So as I said earlier, of course, it's not possible for us to switch off all of our concentration, but narrowing it in on a thing like breath can be really important. And that's directly replicated, or can be directly replicated in a game of cricket. Things are getting a bit tense. Everyone's got 5 seconds to be able to count their breaths and just see if they can center themselves in that moment. Moving on from that, a body scan is a great way of doing it. Quite simply sitting there or standing there and paying attention from your head down to your toes and checking in with each part of it. People will typically do this where they're sat quietly somewhere on a chair and be able to shut their eyes and just focus their senses on that. But it can be done anywhere. I recall doing it on a busy train commuting between Manchester and Liverpool, and just went through that to try and just give myself something else to focus on, and was very effective. We can also look at an exercise that people do quite a lot, the 5 senses. So it doesn't matter which way you do it, but you're then going to say, to bring yourself back into the moment when you may be feeling like you're getting distracted, is go, right, okay, five things that I can see really quickly, that tree, this and this. 4 things that I can hear. 3 things that I can touch, and so on and so forth. And it might not be that you can necessarily taste something as one of your 5 senses, but just then quickly saying, what can I do with regards to my senses, is a good way of getting involved with that. Mindful colouring books are very popular. Again, just taking your mind away from what's happening, focusing on one thing at a time. That's something which art and those kind of things, a distracting thing. Being mindful, it could be cooking, could be anything like that. Something where we're saying, this is some time for me, and to switch off within that. Logging your thoughts is a mindful exercise. Maybe from that sitting and noticing, we might just write down what kind of things kept coming to mind, and then compare them and reflect and say, right, at these times I tend to be feeling this. And that doesn't need to be a rush to judgment and saying anything that's wrong with that, but maybe notice if you're feeling tense at particular times. Is there a common thing? And it can help you to work through some of those things. Last 2, I would say this is something that I've been doing, renewing my practice of this over the last 2 weeks, and just practicing acceptance. So it could be the situation you're in, it could be a particular event, but if I'm sat there going along along the road, and I'll be looking out the window, say we're stopping at the traffic lights, just look around, and there's things that do wind us up. There are, maybe we see someone and we don't like what they're wearing, or we're not happy with something that's going on. Just practice accepting it and saying, that's what it is. and no more. No problem solving, which our brain's always trying to get us to do. Just accept it and see what peace that can bring. And that mindfulness of just being aware that maybe you've made that judgment and saying to yourself, it's okay, I accept what that is, and I'll move on. Very, very powerful. And for a cricket one to finish, think about a pre or post ball routine. That is really rooted in mindfulness. We look at, say, what David Warner does between balls, where he starts to take his glove off. We look at, say, people's little circuit they might do out towards square leg and so on. Can we make use of that and say, right, in these few seconds when maybe my thoughts are racing, I'm getting caught up with it, consciously give yourself a few seconds off to refocus and then to go back in. A sports psych that I was speaking to early this summer was talking about how you can think about where there's almost an imaginary line. And if you step over that between balls, you're able to switch off. Then when you step back across, you're getting yourself ready and going in for it again. So that's a fairly brief conversation about mindfulness. What I hope I've got across is my own personal reasons for wanting to do it, and hopefully that maybe they tally with your own. But there's so many ways that it can be done. The key, as I've said in all the other webinars this week, is just having that intent and wish to do it. Some of the studies show with mindfulness that your focus and concentration can be seen to improve in as little as 4 days. So using something like Headspace and giving that a go during the space of a working week, you would find by the end of it, the likelihood is that you will see an improvement there. So it's not a slow burner where we want to lose weight and things like that, where it might take a long time. You can see big impacts fairly quickly. So if people aren't already practicing meditation and mindfulness, then I would really recommend it and give it a go so you can perhaps be that positive advocate for it in your own cricket community. But my question, which I'm happy to have responses from in the chat, or for people to go away and think about it personally, is how will you develop your mindfulness in cricket and in life? Hopefully I've impressed on you what the benefits can be, some ways of being able to do it. Is there something that's going to be your next step? So please do pop that in the chat. I think it'd be really useful for others to see what the next steps are, and also for myself. But if not, I will email out some resources either tonight or tomorrow, which can help you along with that journey. And I'm always available to chat about it or to swap ideas. So thank you for coming along and listening. I'll leave the chat open if anyone does wish to respond or ask questions, but otherwise, thanks for your time and good night. Okay, if there is still anything being typed, then by all means finish. Otherwise, my email address is mark@openingupcricket.com. You're welcome to send anything over there or reply to the email, which is coming up, as I say, either tonight or tomorrow. Okay. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I think with juniors, it's something that we can definitely introduce to a group of people that might not have a preconception of this. Often with adults, it will be that they hear meditation and they think about the Far East, they think of Buddhism, where in actual fact it's a performance tool as much as anything else. So some of those things about maybe some of the breathing exercises, that might be a useful one, or getting the young players to think um, about how they do react to certain things and just bringing that in. And maybe depending on the age of the juniors, if they are using mobile phones and stuff, perhaps at the sort of under 15 and upwards level, suggesting things like Headspace and Smile in Mind, and saying that a lot of our international cricketers use these things, so therefore, why not try that? Because we practice all the physical things to develop our game. Here's something which can help you with your mindset and things like that. So yeah, I think with the juniors, it's a case of tweaking some of them, but they can be so receptive, can't they, to these things? And if they're built into sessions where we maybe do have a bit of a period of reflection, we might allow a couple of minutes at the end where we are just going to sit there and gather our thoughts and think about it. And that can be a really nice mindful practice. The 5 senses exercise can be quite a fun one, to say, right, let's get ourselves in the zone. Often an issue with young players, isn't there? They were running around there and everywhere, maybe to say, right, okay, we're back in, and we could do the 5 senses there to say, right, if we've got the opportunity, come on, think of 5 things that you can see, then 4 things that you can hear, and whatever else. Something like that might be quite a good way. And then my final thing to say really would be, as you've put there, to be an advocate for mindfulness, to label it, to say these things are practicing mindfulness. This is something that is good for us, and it might then be that the parents sort of look into that and think, yeah, this is good for my child's well-being and their emotional and mental health as well. So I'll email those things over, and then with that, please do just let me know of any questions, and if I can find a resource to help, then I will. But I appreciated that question through beforehand, Mark, as well, to be able to help me focus on some of those things. And I think that prioritization is probably the key in getting people to say, right, what can you actually control now, and try to move along with that. So I'll wish you a good evening, and I'll be in touch via the email, and thank you for coming in for your comments.